April 1944. Pacific. An attack by a Japanese aircraft causes catastrophic damage to an American submarine and sets off a cascade of calamities.
Main power has been lost, and he fears there's possible damage to the pressure hull. But an even larger concern is that the boat begins to dive at a steep angle, and it's going down.
The commander and his crew must overcome the chaos to escape the ocean depths. In World War II, a subsea weapon allows warriors to fight from beneath the waves. With cunning, force, and tenacity, their enemies strike back. Revolutionary, but still sometimes primitive. It's a desperate bid to change the course of war. Their stories are legend. May 28, 1943. American submarine USS Scamp prowls off the island of New Guinea in the West Pacific and searches for targets. The Gato-class submarine, commissioned less than 9 months before, now sails on its second war patrol. Walter Ebert completed the command course at the Naval War College the previous summer. As the U.S. rushed to get men and ships to sea after Pearl Harbor. Just before noon, he identifies a threat.
Ebert spots a Japanese float plane, which has pontoons to allow it to take off and land on water. In World War II, its primary focus was to look for American submarines and surface ships.
While he tracks the aircraft, he also scans for Japanese ships from periscope depth. Minutes later, Scamp's hydrophone operator reports the sound of propellers to the northeast. His search reveals a Japanese seaplane tender.
Ebert finds what he's looking for, and it's a good bet he likes it. It's not a common target like you might find a tanker or a transport.
The seaplane tender, called the Kamikawa Maru, had once been a merchant ship and is one of just 5 vessels in its class.
It seems that the single float plane is actually part of a much bigger operation. In fact, the Kamikawa Maru is a retrofitted ship designed to be able to carry these types of aircraft.
Scamp pursues the seaplane tender just north of the Bismarck Sea, a small corner of the massive Pacific Ocean.
The thing about the Pacific is there aren't a lot of places to put airfields. There aren't a lot of airfields that have been built.
Vessels able to transport and deploy aircraft are vital to naval warfare. And as the battle for Guadalcanal ends in a victory for the Allies, Tokyo digs in to defend the rest of its new empire, including Rabaul, a key port and naval base located at the eastern end of the Bismarck Sea.
Rabaul is hands down the most important Japanese South Pacific base. The center of it is one of the finest natural harbors in the world. They turn it into this enormous complex. It's got 5 different airfields, 2 of which have concrete runways, which is unheard of in this neck of the woods. This place is bristling with defenses. It's honeycombed with storage tunnels and bunkers.
The seaplane tender Commander Ebert stocks also carries provisions, canteen goods, and preserved sake, and set sail for Rabaul 2 days ago. The crew of USS Scamp recognized the opportunity to execute a unique and strategic kill.
Submarines spend a lot of their time on the surface recharging their batteries, so they're extremely afraid of aircraft. And if you can sink a ship like Kamikawa, You put that entire group of a couple dozen planes out of business, and all of a sudden the threat environment that you're operating in now is a lot less dangerous.
But it'll be risky. In addition to the aircraft detected by SCAMP, 2 ships called sub-chasers guard the Kamikara Maru. Merchant transports retrofitted to destroy submarines. More than 200 sub-chasers protect Japanese vessels in the Pacific.
Put a couple machine guns on it, some depth charge racks, and that now is a ship that is threatening enough to a submarine that you can bring it along with a convoy.
And with their target launching aircraft, it's difficult for the Americans to remain undetected. Calm sea conditions mean the U.S. submarine is visible from the air, even submerged.
This is a tough situation. You'll run the risk that the enemy can spot you.
So Ebert must also limit his periscope use to reduce the risk. Meanwhile, his crew readies an attack. They finalize their calculations and move the submarine into position. But suddenly, Ebert loses sight of the seaplane tender.
Before he's able to generate his firing solution, the ship disappears into a rain squall. This causes him to lose all visibility.
For precious minutes, Ebert strains to relocate his target. When he detects the outline through the rain, with a final bearing established, Commander Ebert orders a spread of 5 Mark 14 torpedoes. It's a big investment, about 20% of his allocation for the whole patrol.
The Mark 14 torpedo is the primary armament of U.S. submarines. They cost $10,000. That's enough for 5 Cadillacs, the highest end automobile being produced at the time in the United States.
After just 1 minute, Scamp's crew hears the first torpedo explode. It's sooner than expected, probably a dud.
Scamp is suffering from the kinds of problems that afflict Mark 14 torpedoes generally. Either the torpedoes don't explode, or they explode too early.
Reports indicate that more than half the torpedoes fired by American submarines are defective. The problem is so bad, some American sailors believe that the Japanese might have developed some secret anti-torpedo technology.
Perhaps they've magnetized the hulls of their ships so that the torpedoes explode at a harmless distance. It gets to the point where Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, commanding the submarines in the Southwest Pacific, asks his captains about the feasibility of boarding a Japanese ship to look for these countermeasures.
In the end, they learn it's the American torpedoes that are horribly flawed.
Its design is insufficient to guarantee a detonation against the hull of a ship.
The torpedo that detonated prematurely alerts the Japanese escorts to the presence of an enemy submarine. Ebert hears 2 more early explosions. A sub-chaser that guards the seaplane tender is now less than a kilometer away and closing fast. He doesn't have time to determine if their last 2 torpedoes scored hits before they initiate a dive.
Jackson, how do we hear?
Almost immediately, the Japanese escort releases underwater explosives called depth charges.
The response from the sub-chaser is precise and swift. They're on the defensive at this point. They've got everything to lose.
As the barrels reach their preset depths and start to explode, the crew aboard USS Scamp is rattled.
Depth charges don't have to strike a submarine in order to sink it. They produce a pressure wave, and that pressure wave is what damages the submarine.
"56 meters below the surface, diving officer Lieutenant Philip Bashani controls the American submarine's descent. Born on Long Island in New York, Bashani graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1938. Now, Bashani serves as second in command.
The executive officer. The position requires a lot of industriousness, good judgment, and moral character. Bashani fits that bill perfectly.
Even after Scamp reaches the ordered depth, the enemy attack continues. Patterns of more depth charges chase the sub deep. Crewmen control main propulsion from the maneuvering room.
Scamp's protocol is to try to evade at about 2/3 speed, to put distance between them and any attacker.
Steady up, boys.
Running on batteries, it takes 2 hours for the blasts to fade. And Bashani's escape route to prove successful. With the cover of darkness, Commander Walter Ebert returns Scamp to the surface to charge their batteries and resume the search for the floatplane tender. With time, a dark shape turns out to be the ship they attacked earlier in the day. They try to assess the condition of their prey.
It turns out that Scamp's torpedoes have actually hit their mark, and the target is dead in the water.
Ideally, they would close in to finish what they started. On the seaplane tender's port quarter, there's an escort in position to attack an approaching submarine.
Ebert knows at close range that they're going to be able to detect him, either visually or through electronics.
He weighs the risk and decides to hang back. While the long range of 5.5 kilometers reduces their chance of a hit, with a stationary target presenting a broadside, the torpedo data computer completes the calculations for 2 torpedoes. Nearly 6 minutes later, both torpedoes fired by Scamp strike true. The seaplane tender, one of just 5 of its kind, sinks.
It's a win for Ebert and his crew. It is, without a doubt, a unique feather in their cap.
Ten months later, Lieutenant Philip Bashani remains as executive officer. But 34-year-old John Hollingsworth has assumed command of USS Scamp. A 1931 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, Hollingsworth would begin training on submarines in 1936 and earned a Silver Star as the executive officer of USS Triton in 1942. It's USS Scamp's 7th war patrol.
The crew is far more experienced. And also, a lot of the issues that have plagued the submarine service, they've now had time to sort of work themselves out.
Armed with more reliable torpedoes, Scamp has sunk 4 more enemy ships. As As they proceed to their patrol area in March 1944, the Japanese are increasingly on the defensive.
The Japanese at this point are trying to hold on to a perimeter that defends those raw materials that they captured at the beginning of the war. So holding points on the coast of New Guinea and preventing the Allies from moving further west is extremely important to them.
Commander Hollingsworth and his crew are assigned to shipping routes between islands still held by Japan. They target cargo like ammunition, fuel, and provisions, which sustain the Empire's ground troops.
If you've got an army in a place, you got to supply it. To continue their ground campaign, they have got to bring supplies down to New Guinea. So that becomes a constant race to see, can they get enough logistics?
In the morning hours of April 7th, 1944, after losing a convoy they had tracked during the night, Hollingsworth realizes they have detected something very different. The periscope reveals several warships. At first, he thinks they're Australian cruisers and suspects it's an Allied movement. But careful surveillance changes the picture.
It's actually Imperial Japanese Navy task force. It's cruisers, it's destroyers. It's an extraordinary find.
USS Scamp prepares to move in for the kill. Off the coast of the Philippines, Commander John Hollingsworth creeps forward. At periscope depth, the American submarine USS Scamp approaches 6 enemy cruisers, guarded by destroyers and extensive air cover. At this point in the war, Japan relies heavily on aircraft to protect its vital maritime routes. Through the first month of Scamp's patrol, Hollingsworth recorded 22 aerial contacts.
The reason Scamp is seeing more aircraft in the sky is because there are more aircraft in the sky. The Japanese are getting more serious about beefing up their anti-submarine defenses, and they recognize that patrol aircraft really are an optimal way of going about suppressing that threat.
Intelligence suggests this Japanese flotilla moves to intercept an American task force.
At the time, it's suspected that they're going to head toward Palau. Task Force 58 has just raided that location. It's an important Japanese base.
Hollingsworth must assess the likelihood of a successful attack. Scamp faces multiple challenges. It's daytime, and with heavy air coverage, it's almost impossible for the submarine to approach undetected. Furthermore, any use of Scamp's periscope compounds the problem.
You need your periscope in order to be able to line up your shot. But when it's calm out, you also run the risk that the enemy can spot you, not just the periscope, but also the wake of the periscope.
In spite of it all, Scamp's crew presses the attack. The submarine maneuvers straight into the heart of the task force, with all tubes readied. They line up shots against a light cruiser with their bow tubes, and a heavy cruiser from the stern. But as Hollingsworth looks to confirm his final firing solutions, Japanese sailors detect the submarine. One of the task force's destroyers swings towards them and is quickly within less than 700 meters. The tables have turned.
This is not a great moment for the commander or his crew. I mean, they are there to sink ships.
Executive and diving officer Philip Bishani acts fast to take the sub down.
And when you come that close to a target and you have to abort the operation and dive, it's a no-win situation for them.
Even worse, they must prepare for reprisals. crew hears depth charges detonate. But the underwater explosions sound far off. For some reason, the task force seems unable to pinpoint Scamp's location.
Hollingsworth comes to realize that likely the destroyers on the surface have had to maneuver around other ships, and in the process of doing so, they've lost track of where he is.
The enemy search for Scamp lasts almost 2 hours before the sea finally falls silent. By afternoon, Scamp's crew initiates a return to the surface. In broad daylight, with Japanese warships and planes in the area, it's a dangerous move for a submarine. But Hollingsworth needs to transmit a contact report. Having failed to attack the ships, he must alert the U.S. Navy to the location of the Japanese task force and its heading.
Reconnaissance is a key role of these submarines. If Scamp can report these ships, they can be located and potentially destroyed.
The radio man begins to relay the message, but cannot get the information out. For more than an hour, Scamp's lookouts watch for threats.
I suspect they were feeling very vulnerable. They do have a radar which can detect the presence of surface ships, but it's not very effective at detecting aircraft.
While the radio man tries to send their report with increasing urgency. Beyond their view, a Japanese float plane conducts a patrol.
Float planes are not the highest performance, but they're very, very useful for scouting missions and particularly for anti-submarine warfare.
First used by the Imperial Japanese Navy during World War I, these aircraft, which can be transported by ships, don't require airstrips to take off and land.
With a float plane, all I have to do is find a piece of water that is reasonably calm that I can operate that thing out of. All you have to do is have a tender ship pick up that float plane base and move it to another location if the battlefield moves as well.
This mobility seems essential to hold isolated islands in the battle for the Pacific. On April 7, 1944, a Mitsubishi F1M2 known as a Pete comes out of the sun at an altitude of less than 500 meters.
Sir! Enemy aircraft, 1 o'clock! Dive!
The watch scrambles to clear the bridge to allow Scamp to dive. The submarine is only 12 meters below the surface when the Japanese airman drops his payload. The impact is catastrophic.
When this depth charge goes off, it's a massive explosion. Anyone not holding on to something is going to be knocked to the ground.
Hollingsworth and his crew begin a fight for survival. On board the submarine, American Commander John Hollingsworth begins to receive reports of the damage inflicted by a massive explosion at close range.
As Hollingsworth pulls himself together, he realizes that power has been lost, and he fears there's possible damage to the pressure hull.
The bomb dropped by a Japanese float plane has smashed in a 50-foot section of Scamp's port side. Fuel spews from a shattered tank.
But an even larger concern is that the boat begins to dive, and it's going down quickly.
In the maneuvering room, the crew struggles with thick smoke.
A fire on board a submerged submarine is a terrifying experience. A boat on the surface can open the hatches, they can air it out. When you're deep below, there's nowhere for those toxic gases to go.
In the control room, diving officer Philip Bishani tackles the greatest threat. Unsure of the extent of the damage, they have no idea whether Scamp can withstand the water pressure.
As they are going down, pressure is increasing every moment on that submarine, and that's where the danger really lies.
Bishani's men attempt to control the submarine's descent. But the vents that prevent seawater from entering the ballast system have failed.
Bishani discovers what the problem is. When the depth charge went off, it knocked the controller for the hydraulic power vents in the off position.
An adjustment allows the crew to close the vents and blow the undamaged ballast tanks to force out the seawater and replace it with lighter air. They estimate that Scamp has over 100 tons of positive buoyancy, but it's not enough.
Positive buoyancy means precisely what it sounds like. Scamp should be heading to the surface, but despite all their best efforts, it's not, and that's a problem.
The damaged submarine sinks past 120 meters or 400 feet. Every additional meter they descend makes things worse.
It's anybody's guess how much deeper it can go. If they have damage to the pressure hull, that increases the risks of a catastrophic collapse.
Elsewhere on this sinking submarine, smoke from the fire in the maneuvering room intensifies. Crewmen, choked by noxious air, seal off the compartment. They don protective gear, a rudimentary gas mask, to go back in. Chief Electrician's mate John McNeil, who has just joined the crew of USS Scamp, leads a daunting mission. He must return to the compartment and locate the source of the smoke. The absence of visible flames suggests an electrical fire somewhere in the submarine's wiring. The components of Scamp's electrical system produce gases when burned, which are highly toxic. Exposure creates symptoms similar to chlorine gas, the deadly weapon unleashed during the First World War.
The sensation on board a submarine of breathing in that smoke and that toxic air, it's exactly like what you would experience in a chemical warfare scenario.
Back in the control room, efforts made by diving officer Philip Bishani finally pay off. Their uncontrolled descent ends, and they stabilize. But then, Scamp's bow begins to rise sharply. Once again, the submarine isn't under Bishani's control. He makes a quick decision.
Bishani orders all available men to run to the front of the ship, literally to try to tip that balance downward.
Crew members throw their weight into the forward torpedo room. it's just enough to right the scale. The bow levels out. But Scamp still rises. For Bashani, complete control remains elusive because the power systems remain offline, knocked out by the fire. With each passing moment, the submarine gets closer to the surface, and any Japanese warships or aircraft which might gather overhead. Commander John Hollingsworth must prepare to fight it out when they get there.
Hollingsworth doesn't know what he's going to find, so he has to order all of his men to get ready.
But crew fighting the electrical fire and those preserving the trim of the submarine aren't available to take up arms. If Scamp passes 50 feet or 15 meters, it will be left to the section watch to defend the submarine.
When that hatch is open, your gunners, your ammunition loaders, everybody's ready for the potential of a gun battle on the surface with an enemy Japanese ship.
Off the coast of the Philippines, in the vicinity of Japanese aircraft and warships, USS Scamp is now just 4 feet, or about 1 meter from the depth at which Commander John Hollingsworth must be ready to dispatch his section watch.
Any gun battle between a ship and a submarine, the submarine is the inherent weaker party.
Bashani works to regain control. And the American submarine levels off just below 50 feet or 15 meters. The section watch can stand down.
The men no doubt feel a huge sense of relief. The submarine has not broached or breached the surface.
But their battle to survive continues. Chief Electrician's mate John McNeil has failed to locate the source of the fire in the maneuvering room. If they can't extinguish it, they will be unable to restore power, and toxic smoke could kill everyone on board. As they search, one of the crew loses consciousness. Lieutenant Commander Tom Sutherland sees the struggle and manages to evacuate the electrician's mate to the safety of another compartment. Where they are able to resuscitate him. But in the control room, Diving Officer Lieutenant Philip Bashani still struggles to keep the submarine at a stable depth. And Scamp drops deeper again. He relies on the submarine's ballast tanks to control depth. When compressed air is pumped into the tanks, it displaces water and increases buoyancy to create upward motion. But the stored compressed air required to stop its descent starts to run low.
Every submarine only has a limited amount of compressed air, and if your power is out, you don't have the ability to generate more.
Up above, the Japanese float plane pilot who scored the hit on the American submarine observes debris and an oil slick 4 kilometers long.
He's dropped depth charges on this sub, and we know, of course, that he blows the decking and a lot of the superstructure of that sub. All of that stuff is going to float to the surface, along with oil and whatnot.
Fortunately for the crew of Scamp, he doesn't drop another bomb.
I see all of this, wreckage bobbing around there. There's no need to drop any more. Even we, on the other side in the Atlantic, if we saw that same sort of wreckage, we would call that a kill too.
Out of sight of the aircraft, the electrical blaze poses an ongoing threat to the submarine, especially if it spreads.
Submarines have vulnerabilities, including batteries, which can lead to chlorine gas that can just pollute the air.
As Chief Electrician's mate John McNeil tries to control the fire, his mask does little to protect him. He also succumbs to the deadly smoke. Fortunately, other crew discover he has passed out. They drag him from the compartment. Even with the fire extinguished, Scamp has lacked critical power to the propulsion units for nearly 15 minutes. If their electrical systems can't be brought back, the submarine may be unable to raise itself from the depths.
They're running out of options. This is becoming a life or death situation.
The crew of USS Scamp managed to revive Chief Electrician's mate John McNeil. The toxic environment created by the electrical fire make it increasingly difficult for him to locate the source of the blaze and restore power to the American submarine. Vomiting and other effects of poisoning due to the smoke threaten his progress and test his resolve. In the control room, Lieutenant Philip Bishani, executive and diving officer, uses all his tricks to compensate for the damaged tanks and flooding, which make it difficult to control USS Scamp. He worries as the supply of compressed air runs low, and whether they can maintain a safe depth until the power systems come back online so they can create more.
That compressed air is how you fill up your tanks in order to be able to return to the surface. Without it, you're stuck below.
Then, USS Scamp springs to life. Power is restored to the motors, allowing the crew better control of their depth, followed by a manual reset of the rudder to recover full directional control. McNeil has accomplished a near miracle. He has restored just enough power for critical systems by neutralizing the fire in the maneuvering room, believed to be caused by an electrical surge when Scamp was attacked by the Japanese float plane. Though only part of a single component burned, the toxic material it was made of nearly doomed Scamp's crew. High above the submarine, the Japanese float plane pilot banks away, convinced he has fulfilled his duty.
From his perspective, he has sunk this boat. When he goes back home and reports, they're like, yeah, that's a kill, and he ends up getting a medal out of the deal.
But the airman is mistaken. Incredibly, Scamp ascends to 45 meters and crawls away. Commander John Hollingsworth is amazed by their survival.
Hollingsworth praises the great construction of the Scamp, and in his patrol report he actually writes, "I heartily endorse the Navy Yard as the builder of rugged submarines."
3 days later, Scamp's radio man can finally transmit a status report to the U.S. Navy. Another submarine, USS Dace, locates Scamp and escorts it to safe port with a list of 9 degrees.
Scamp returns to Milne Bay, which is in Papua New Guinea, and a huge crowd gathers. Everybody wants to see the submarine that has really come back and survived against all odds.
A later report would say that the damage Scamp sustained is the most severe known to have been survived by any U.S. submarine during World War II.
It turns out that 3 of the ballast tanks had actually been ripped open and exposed to the sea. This, of course, explains why Bashani had such trouble controlling the boat.
For his leadership during USS Scamp's 7th War Patrol, Commander John Hollingsworth is presented with the Legion of Merit. He gives full credit to the crew.
Hollingsworth knows that this is the payoff for having an experienced, well-trained crew. And he sums it up in his report when he says, "There was no confusion and all hands did their jobs well."
Bashani earns the Bronze Star.
Bashani's contribution to the Scamp goes far beyond just April of 1944. I mean, as executive officer, he has put his crew through fire drills, all sorts of other exercises, all of which, of course, helps them rise to the occasion when all hell breaks loose.
After the war, Bashani would become the first Deputy Chief of Naval Operations of Submarines and rise to the rank of Vice Admiral before he retires. Chief Electrician's mate John McNeil also earns the Bronze Star for his perseverance in repairing their power system. Lieutenant Commander Tom Sutherland, who pulled others from the smoke to safety, also receives a Bronze Star. Incredibly, despite the crushed and torn metal, the Navy decides that USS Scamp can be saved. Crew work to repair her battered shell. She is deemed seaworthy and sets out on another war patrol. In November 1944, the submarine operates off the coast of Japan.
On the 8th War Patrol, Scamp's luck sadly finally runs out. They are presumed lost and never heard from again.
John Hollingsworth, John McNeil, and Tom Sutherland are among the crewmen on Eternal Patrol.